Great. So I'm starting to record right now, and it's just 4 questions. And the first is, so Susanna, what is your dream?
Mm, what is my dream? Yeah, so I guess if I were to sort of think about where I see my life heading, it would be really to create the context and the structure for greater understanding between people. People who imagine that they cannot relate to the other, So this thing that I spoke about earlier, about how we seem to be like pulled apart into two sort of seemingly polar opposites, and
Mm.
yet there are many things that we share and care about together, and those things sort of the building blocks of a more healed state of being as human beings. So I think for me, that's a real dream, that people would not anymore have enemy images of other people, such that they can kill them, bomb them, go to war with them, harm them, but recognize each other's common humanity.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's my dream. Yeah.
People without enemy images of each other, people
Yeah.
relating who didn't think they could.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean that covers so many different things. I mean
Yeah.
it's between two people,
Mm.
it's groups, it's
Mm.
nations. I mean it's human beings. And so I was listening to this podcast recently, and this scientist, Jonathan Haidt, talking about how he had very low expectations of human beings and how they are. Because people keep saying, oh, what about the higher principles, the higher this and the higher moral and a higher ethic and whatever. And he says, you know, we are primates who have done remarkably well in getting along. And the only reason why human beings are right at the top of the pile right now is because they figured out how to not keep killing each other and not keep harming each other, and actually figured out how to coalesce and work together.
Mm.
So we think about ourselves as primates, sort of bleeding, sort of, uh, sort of damageable, fragile beings. Yeah. We're not invincible. We die all the time. Yeah. So we're dying, and we've created rituals around that, and we celebrate life in different ways. And so if you look across all of us, there's so much that's in common. And that in fact, 7 billion people, very few are dying. Yeah, because the net growth as humanity is continuously going up. So we've gotten to a point where we're not killing every single person that we don't get along with. We might shout at them or something like that, but so he regards it as we've already gotten to a place of being able to live in a fair amount of peace and harmony with each other.
So
So
with that as background, I'd like you to just one more time. Let's see how it comes out this time. What is your dream?
yeah, that is the same. It's the same concept, So it's a concept of us being able to live, to share, to collaborate, to have joy, to celebrate, to grieve, um, in ways that recognize each other's humanity. That we can see the other, and we're not we do not have those damning negative enemy images of other people who we don't relate to or we believe do not share our values.
Great.
So
So
that is
so
it.
Your dream is we are able to live, share, have what? I missed a word. There was so much there. Something. Celebrate, grieve in ways that recognize our common humanity. We can see each other. That is your dream. How you use the word
Mm-hmm.
thrive. Absolutely. We thrive. We can see each other. And so with that dream, what is the obstacle?
Um, hmm. So, I guess the obstacle is that, so perhaps what I said to you is that I spend a lot of time on my own, right? And in groups, I'm not able to speak my truth. Yeah. So in my family system, I don't say 1/100th of any of this. Yeah. In the feminist organization that I'm in, um, if I get into something deeper, very often people feel threatened or they can't cope, or if I and because I'm very, very strong on the idea of ethics and principles, when I question ethics and principles in a group, people kind of get all anxious. So there's the realization that I am sort of like,
Sharon, sorry,
as
hang on a
I
second.
evolve.
Sharon, can you answer this, please? Thanks. I heard the last words. As I evolve.
So I woke up only 14 years ago. I was asleep like everybody else. Yeah. And even when I was asleep, I was regarded as some kind of like very, very kind of accomplished feminist and whatever, but I was completely asleep. I had no connection with myself, my inner mental models, no connection with my assumptions, my fears. It was, my life was lived completely external to myself. Yeah. So that entire process of being external is what I consider being asleep. Yeah. When you are asleep, you are not aware that there's an inner life, and that inner life and inner reckoning and inner sense making is how we interact with the world. Yeah. So once you get an awareness of that or a glimpse of that, you cannot go back to sleep. It's interesting because once you're awake, you might get sleepy and you might take a little nap, but you will never go fully to sleep again because you're awake. And so the idea of being awakened, I consider it a complete gift. I had no ability to awake myself. So if there is a divinity, that's the moment where I experienced it. Yeah, the experience of the divine, because it was completely by grace. It had nothing to do with me doing anything. So that kind of awakening has sort of made it possible for me to start what I call this evolution beyond the basic elements of adulthood into a higher and higher degree of consciousness. Yeah. But what happens is I'm finding that it means that I'm more and more alone because there are fewer and fewer people that I can actually be super honest with. Not that I'm not honest. It's just that I, like, in a conversation, I only say like a fourth of what I'm thinking. Right? On a general sort of, and even my two best friends here, they're at different stages of human development, and I'm fine with that. I'm absolutely fine with that. But that also means that sometimes I'm not able to say everything that I need to say to them. One is of a higher level of human development, fortunately, so I'm able to say much more to her. The other one, who is 10 years younger than me, but also my best friend, and she's got a PhD from Harvard. Okay, so it's not about intelligence. It's really about this waking up process. So for me, the obstacle is really to not despair that I am alone.
Ah.
You know, sometimes I despair. Sometimes I think I can't. You know, that I can't feeling, which
Mm.
is, you know, one of the inner conversations that I tend to sort of battle with. And also, even when we evolve um, to higher states of consciousness, we carry with us all of the elements of of our childhood with us, you know. And one of the obstacles is that I really had a terrible childhood. You know, it was a bad one. I had two very immature parents, you know, who were not able to meet my needs emotionally. I mean, they met my needs physically. Um, so I was fed and I was clothed. I went to school. You know, we had holidays, and you know, but since they were completely asleep, um, I grew up with such a lot of kind of like emotional and psychological trauma that I still carry that. I still carry that. So even like, you know, just this, I was telling you, I'm filling up this proposal for
Mm.
this job that I can hear the inner voice. I mean, who do you think you are? I mean, you know, you're going to put that for your consultant fee? You know, like this kind of voice of,
Oh, yes.
you know, doubt, of
Yes.
self-doubt.
Yes.
Yeah. Um,
So maybe that's a good interruption place for
yeah.
question 3. So what do
Yeah.
you need or request?
Yeah, so one of the things that I put up for myself as a goal for this year, which I haven't quite really worked on this year, is so there's this continued kind of, one of the things that I realized is that a real challenge is my lack of attention to my inner spiritual life. You know?
Oh,
So
I want to say that. I want to slow that right down. Lack of attention to my inner spiritual life.
yeah, so that so what do I need? I need myself. Yeah. I
Oh.
need to return to myself and re-establish a kind of a much more intimate connection with myself. Yeah, so I call that like spiritual discipline, but it's really the checking in that I was telling you about. You know, if I was able to go through the world with the awareness and the reflexivity and the checking in
Yeah.
that I was doing while I was doing my research. And if I could just even sort of recreate even a like a tenth of that attention
Yeah.
as I go through my life, that would be, and so that's really about spiritual discipline, you know. And for me, I have, do you know what a klesha is? Do you know what? Anyway, so in Buddhism, a klesha is like a obstacle. Actually, it's an obstacle. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
everyone has obstacles or weak points
Mm-hmm.
in their personality and in their bodies. Yeah. So the Chinese system of medicine, of course, it's about the weak organs and the strong organs, and you're trying to balance this out, right? So in Buddhism, there's this idea of a klesha, and every human being has kleshas. It's a matter of identifying what your kleshas are and overcoming them, right? So the kleshas that I have are anger and jealousy, yeah, and self-doubt.
Mm.
I think self-doubt was put there by my parents from my lousy childhood, yeah. So this is the one that
Mm.
I can deal with
Yeah.
because I can see it now.
Mm.
Anger also, I think, has something to do with my genes. Yeah, I come from angry lineage. I have many stories about my grandmother, who was a farmer's wife, like screaming and shouting. I grew up with a mother who screamed and shouted for everything. I every day she was shouting. And so I grew up angry, and I grew up jealous. And jealousy is really one of the most depleting of kleshas,
Mm.
because it eats you. You know, so when you explain to a person who is not jealous this feeling of jealousy, they're like, "What? How could you even feel?" You know, so I have met people who don't have jealousy as a klesha. They, they're like open, generous, giving. Jealousy is not a part of their system, right? They have something else. Everybody has something. But jealousy is a real kind of like it can really revolve on the inside. It can play up with your self-doubt. And jealousy is about esteem. You're jealous of other people when you don't value yourself, right? So these are my three kleshas.
Mm.
So now that I have this kind of external thing called a master's degree, the foundation for that, the knowledge system, for the innate knowing, for the level of human development, is to actually address my kleshas.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
So I would say that I gave you the sort of the order of them the wrong way around. Self-doubt is the least of my worries right now. Yeah, because that's actually fixing itself.
Mm.
Anger, better. Yeah. But because it's genetic, I really think it's like DNA level, because I grew up with an angry mother, and anger is a go-to response.
Mm.
It happens so quickly that it's a short circuit that happens so quickly. So I have no ability to stop anger except the minute after I'm angry.
Mm.
So right now, what I strongly desire is to stop the anger a minute before say or act, as opposed to a minute after.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's going to take years. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like
It's
a powerful sub dream. It's like there's a dream that's gonna take a lot of work. Yeah.
But the hardest one, which is at number one position, is jealousy.
Jealousy.
Because and that's the klesha that is an obstacle for me, because it matches into all sorts of other things. So there's professional jealousy, there's personal jealousy. Maybe professional jealousy is known as envy, right? So there's all of this stuff internally. So when I say the greatest obstacle is like my lack of connection with myself, because I think that once I figure that out, it's all available. So like one of the things I've put on my sort of list of things for what are priorities for 2018 is to build a community. Yeah. And it's not that I don't have community. It's not that I don't
Yeah.
It's not that I don't have community. It's that I don't have a particular type of community. Because I have several communities. I have my family. They're a definite community, but I am completely an outlier. Complete fringe dweller. They don't know a hundredth of who I am, because I don't say.
So what's the
I'm
community
not
you're building this year, or entering, or connecting, or something?
right. So the community of people where I do not have to diminish myself.
Yes.
Yeah. I have been. I mean, and I don't. I know it's not to diminish the people around me. It's just that even in the early 90s, in my 20s, I kept feeling like I had to be less in
Yeah.
order to fit in.
Oh, I've got
You know.
you. I'm totally there. So
So to be less than my full self, because that was the only way people could accept me. I am, as you know, very intense. Yeah. And that intensity and that sort of that kind of strong presence
Mm.
is what threatens a lot of people in the local women's organization that I go to. In a lot of spaces, I open my mouth and then people kind of like, either they respect me and they think, wow, I want to know that person, or they're like, I don't like that person because she makes me feel small,
So you're
right?
building, or you're pulling yourself into, or something. You're something, a community where you can bring your full self, and presumably everyone there can bring their full selves.
Yes, and so that they accept that if
I might
if
be. Sorry.
if I'm feeling diminished by someone,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's inside my system and it's not their fault. So people take in, it's a community where people take responsibility, 100% responsibility for every emotion. So like that magic tree that I was telling you about and the clouds,
Yeah.
people would recognize that these clouds are their own clouds.
Yes.
So no one would say, you made me feel small.
You
You
took that
humiliated me.
cloud. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
You
brought
know,
the cloud.
you humiliated me.
Yeah.
You made me angry. You wouldn't be able to say those things anymore because you would understand the self system, how the self system generates your responses to the group.
Yes.
So that you understand self system and group. Sorry, yeah.
So great. Number 4. I feel like we have an amazing background for this question, and it's just such an open question. So what do you offer?
So several things. One thing that I offer is my examined life. Yeah, the life that has been examined, and that I think is more and more important. That we actually examine our lives, because our lives themselves are the tool. Any tool that we need, we can find it. So and our lives in story form. The ability to tell your story with honesty and integrity, and not shy away from the ugliness of aspects of our lives. Yeah, so I think that so for example, the fact that I can talk about my family, the fact that I can talk about my sexuality, the fact that I can talk about the abuse that I've experienced in my life, the fact that I can talk about the extraordinary stupidity and failure, and not try to mask it. That offering in itself is an offering. Yeah, because as soon as, and if I'm a facilitator in a process, and I speak in a way that is, it's okay for me to speak my truth, and it's okay to share what is not so pretty about my life or my personality. Yeah, and to acknowledge things that people generally don't acknowledge. I mean, there's a lot of shame in saying that you're an angry, jealous, abused, harmed person, right?
But
People
none of
generally
that
don't say that.
shame, no shame comes across as you say that.
Sorry?
And yet no shame comes across as you say that.
Right, because I've examined my life.
And
So
you,
the
yes.
that is that kind of, so
So that's
I guess
number one.
one of the offerings is that, that this is a life that has been examined. I offer this life
Yes.
as an examined life. The second thing I offer is the constantly refined tools, that, and by tools I actually mean things like questions. Yeah, the questions that I ask, the questions that I ask myself when I design a space, the way I listen, that's a tool. The way I then create spaces based on what I'm hearing, what I'm sensing, and what I intuitively know. That is an offering, because
Mm.
I know that it has come. I mean, I can see the difference between stuff that I have. I mean, so I was starting to facilitate from maybe 2006, 2007. But then I started to actually read about it and enter into these different kinds of training and etc. in 2009.
Mm.
Yeah. So let's say there's been a span of about a decade of active facilitation, and a decade before that of completely being thrown into situations as an activist where you're required to facilitate, as an executive director where you're required to facilitate, and you don't know what you're doing at all. You know, you're just winging it, right? And to that sort of like the slowly refined ability to be completely present for a group, you know, as a facilitator with, you know, the ego is sort of like nicely sort of shaven down, all of the raw edges and the possible flare up. So in terms of my anger in a group, it almost is hardly there anymore. Yeah, so the flare up of the ego in a group is so much reduced now, because I'm continuously conscious of this role that I play in a group. You know? So so I guess that's the second thing that I have to offer.
Mm.
And maybe finally, um, I'd say I have my good heart to offer. You know.
Yes, very much
So,
so.
so yeah. So the real sort of like, and I also attribute this to my family. You know, we're you know, so one of the things that also with this Jonathan Haidt's interview, which I found fascinating, he said that, you know, that he's discovered people of religion, people who have a faith, are generally much kinder than people who don't have faith. You know, and and that people who have religion have a stronger sense of their contribution to others. How can they help other people? How can they make a difference, not just for themselves and their families, but for others? So I see that as a legacy from my family, you know, because you know that angry grandmother of mine, who was a screamer, yeah, was also so fierce that she went against social norms in her village, and allowed, there's a called the Harijans, the untouchables, the Dalits, yeah, in India, and they would have to walk for miles to get water because they were seen as polluting, and that they weren't allowed to gather water from anywhere near the village. Yeah. And so my screaming grandmother was one of the first people in her village to offer her well to the Dalits. And that kind of tradition is part of my legacy. So and that comes from her faith, right? So she was a very strong Christian kind of like person, you know, shaped by her religion, right? So so even though I'm not Christian, like I cannot fit in with my family and, oh, praise Jesus, thank you Lord, and you know, like I'm not that. I just can't do this. And in my family group, I mean, best I can do is, okay, God bless you, or praying for you, or something like that. But generally speaking, in my family group, I'm not able to produce that kind of, you know, kind of responses. Praise the Lord and whatever, which I, in my family group, we have a WhatsApp group, and I'm just like, always like, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? You know? But we all share a legacy of concern for other people.
Uh,
And we have that in our ancestry.
mm,
The lack of selfishness, um, even amongst people who were poor. So my grandmother and grandfather were not wealthy people; they were landed people. So that meant that they were wealthier than a lot of people around them. You know, so during the times of famine, my grandmother was, you know, distributing food. You know, this legacy goes even on my father's side. His grandfather, which is my great grandfather. There's many stories. So I think that the good heart I don't attribute to myself, but literally from all the it's like the awakening of my heart happened with the total, like the community that I say that I can't relate to, the family that I say that I have little connection with. They have been integral to good heart, you know. So I think that for me to sort of say that good heart came from me wouldn't be acknowledging that we are a product of the communities and the families that we grow up in,
that's
and
more
they
the full
definitely have
story.
been,
The more the full
yeah,
story. Yeah.
yeah. So
Wow. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for answering those 4 questions. I'm going to end the recording. I think there's more to be said, but the recording ends now. Thank you so much.
yeah, sure.